Diablo 4 Season 3, should you play it? Should you care? Should you pass it? Should you do something else? These are the questions on our mind. And I'm going to attempt to answer that question for you by going through the most recent live stream. Take a look at the time codes below if you want to skip a certain topic and jump forward. But there's a lot to unpack here, so let's get right into it. How can we not start with talking about the Seneschal itself, our little robot pet that we're going to have access to in Season 3? The Seneschal is going to be, well, what you want it to be. It's not going to be the lead character unless you build it to be a lead character, but it also has the ability to be a support character as well, where it lets you get the killing blow by building it to enable you to access part of your kit in a more efficient way. So let's look at it from a high level. We're going to have things called governing stones and tuning stones. Governing stones are going to be basically the ability we give the thing. We can give it 2 of them. The tuning stones are going to be how it modifies that ability, how we can change it to fit exactly what we want. For those of us who have played Path of Exile, it's going to be your skill gems versus support skill gems. Your tuning stone is going to modify that ability in pretty seemingly large ways. For example, they did like a fire spout ability that the Seneschal was able to do, and by default it looked like it only hit like 1 or 2 enemies with like a fire chain effect. And then after you put one of your tuning stones into it, it was able to chain to a whole screen full of them. So that's pretty cool to know that we can really modify these abilities to fit exactly what we want. And they did mention that what you can do is use these to apply status effects to open up parts of your kit. For example, it could apply the burning effect or possibly the bleeding effect, stun effect, and things like that you can then take advantage of by using your abilities that combo off of that. So kind of a set and spike situation when it comes to your relationship to your companion. So our goal is to empower this thing and improve how it interacts with our kit as we find these stones. But we do know there's going to be 2 unique stones that are going to be available to us. These are going to drop exclusively from the major uber boss, Malphus. Malphus is going to be the major boss, kind of like Zir was, but with a spin. He's actually going to have a bunch of trap components that we have to avoid during his fight. When they showed the actual footage of fighting the boss, it looked like they zoomed the camera out a little bit so we get more of a field of view to see all of the traps and components and things coming at us, so we can know how to avoid it and use our movement skills to be able to get around the traps and moves that it's throwing. And actually, they did mention that the boss is going to be in a fixed position throughout the entirety of the fight. I'm really interested to see how they can make that different and cool, but I'm glad they're trying new things. So back to the Seneschal. Seneschal is going to scale off of your stats as well to keep it relevant throughout the entire season. And also, we're able to improve these stones by using the jeweler. The jeweler is going to be kind of our major crafting station when it comes to interacting with this season mechanic. So we're able to craft the stones, upgrade the stones, and do all that kind of stuff with the jeweler. We'll have to see how much control we have over our stones and their power when we actually get our hands on working with a jeweler and see like what kind of crafting recipes he has and that kind of stuff. Okay, so something we can take our little robot doggies to is we're going to head on into a new type of dungeon that's called vaults. This is going to be an alternative or an additional option when it comes to the nightmare dungeon level, where they're going to share the same idea of leveling glyphs. And now we get to vaults as another option to level our glyphs as well. Which one will be more efficient? We'll have to see when this mechanic actually releases. We get to play around with it a little bit, but usually the way it goes when it comes to a new mechanic from Blizzard, it's going to be super powerful. But the vaults are going to be about dodging traps. Remember I talked about how Malphus is going to throw a bunch of traps at us throughout the fight? These are going to be the kind of training grounds on where we can see all the traps put before us and learn about how to avoid them. A lot of these mechanics do kind of echo with the spirit of Path of Exile, with the tuning stones being like support gems and the governing stones being like skill gems. But also, it almost reminds me of the Trial of Ascendancies, where you're able to go through a series of traps you have to avoid, like the saw blades and spikes and fire traps, and they do seem to have some of those. And hey, I don't mind when Blizzard steals other games' stuff and puts their own Blizzard spin on it. I actually think Blizzard's at their strongest when they do borrow ideas and then give it the old Blizzard spin. Dragon flying anyone in World of Warcraft? Thanks for that, Guild Wars. Now, part part of avoiding the traps, the reason why we want to dodge these traps is not because they're going to kill us, but we're also going to have this buff walking into the dungeon called Zoltankul's Warding. This is going to deplete as we're hit by traps, and if we cross the finish line, get to the end of the dungeon without any warding, we're not able to open the major chest at the end for our item rewards. It's unclear if we're still able to get the glyph experience, but it is going to deplete our ability to open up the major chests at the end. More on that in a second as we move into the next seasonal feature. Arcane Tremors remind me a lot of Blood Harvest. They remind me a lot of, because it's going to be a overworld event where we're going to go there and be able to see other players and complete the objective together with the other players that are in the area. It seems like the spirit of that is kind of carried forward with the Arcane Tremors. They're going to pop up every so often. We'll be able to complete them, get some rewards from it. And one of the rewards in particular is the Pearls of Warding, okay? So we can collect Pearls of Warding and use them to be able to add more stacks of Zoltankul's Warding to help us when we go into the vault. That's going to give us more chances. Think of it as like extra lives. When we mess up more inside the vault, it's going to deplete less of our warding buff, and we'll be able to keep that as we go through the dungeon. One of the developers joked that they're notorious for always hitting each of the traps, and they said that you can brute force your way through the dungeon, brute force your way through the vault if you do get enough of your warding. So that can be a strategy if you're notoriously bad at moving around and avoiding traps. I was really glad to see them add both a dungeon specific, like a dungeon feature, and also an overworld feature. And they did mention that that's one of their design philosophies moving forward. They want to make sure that we're mobile in the way that we interact with the game and not always just jamming one particular thing. They want us in the dungeons, they want us out of the dungeons in the overworld, seeing other players, and they're trying to strike a balance between the two. Season 2 was way more about being out in the overworld, and they said they wanted to keep the emphasis on seeing other players and being in the overworld, but also give us more options when it comes to not just nightmare dungeons, but we also get the vault options too. So far, that sounds great. Now for some disappointing news. Gauntlet and leaderboards are not coming at the start of season 3. I know a lot of us have been waiting and really excited about getting some kind of way to compare our characters to other characters and have a real competitive reason to drive hard into the late game and push ourselves to try to get on some kind of scoreboard, some kind of leaderboard, something like that. Well, the Gauntlet is going to be the answer to that when it comes out. And we don't know exactly when that might be, a few weeks, maybe a month, but it's going to be a way into the season where we're actually going to be able to participate in this fixed seed dungeon. Now, fixed seed dungeon, what does that mean? It means that each week we're going to be running the same dungeon to try to score as high of a score, to try to get as high of a score as we possibly can in that same dungeon as everyone else. Think of it kind of like the challenge rifts from Diablo 3. If you play Diablo 3, the challenge rifts, everybody had the same dungeon that they went through, and they had this same character and build, and it was just about trying to be hyper efficient and trying to work your way through that in the best ways you possibly can. This is going to have a similar component to that, but is not stacked so much on just getting the fastest speed you can, but you're trying to, it's like you're playing an Atari game where you're trying to get the highest score. Points are going to be awarded based on weights that the monsters have, the number of monsters you fight, and also how you kill them. There's things called pillars where you can drag monsters over to it, for example, and get more points based on the monsters you kill around or shortly after you activate the pillar. In the footage example that they gave, they showed the player walk into the dungeon and find this brand new, very special boss called Tomb Lord. God, I'm sick of seeing Tomb Lord. But anyway, you're able to drag that boss and all the mobs over to this other pillar that they were able to then to activate and kill the enemies around, or were able to just kill the enemies around that pillar to be able to get a multiplier on their score, where it's more about trial, error, and figuring out the most efficient routes through the dungeon to be able to maximize score based on, sure, speed is going to have a component to it, but also how you can group monsters up and effectively kill them in the best areas, depending on pillars and what other things are available to it. Kind of reminds me a little bit about like Mythic Plus from World of Warcraft, but but every week we're going to have a new one. So we're always going to be hunting for the effective strategy of the week. Sounds like a really cool mechanic. We'll have to see once we get our hands on it. Now, really quick about how leaderboards are scored. We're not going to be competing against every single other player in a giant bucket like it was for the most part in Diablo 3 until they fixed it in the way late seasons. But we are going to be competing just against other players of our class, platform, party type, game type, right? So all of these are going to have an influence on it. Hardcore players only play against hardcore players on the leaderboard. Duo players only fight against duos, and so on. So it's going to depend where we are in the leaderboard, and what leaderboard we're on is going to depend on how we're playing the game. They even mentioned platform on this too. So console players aren't going to be directly competing against PC players. So this is a huge W. This is definitely a good decision when it came to how they structured the leaderboards and how they made it only compete against other players of your similar type, game, and so on. So again, gauntlets aren't going to be available immediately when the season comes out, but this is something we can look forward to as the weeks progress and as we move further into the season. Next, let's talk about how they restructured this season journey. Season journey is going to be behaving a little bit differently with how season 3 wants to progress. The rewards are first of all going to increase, and also when it comes to spending our ashes, it's going to have different options for us. Now, this is what I was really excited about when it came to the season journey. We're going to get major improvements to the rewards that are given to us. And also, they're removing some of the challenge types that we have to do. For example, the PvP ones seem to be binned, but the rewards are going to be increased by quite a bit. It seemed to be that we're also going to be getting loot rewards like ancestral legendaries at a high level, but giving me another avenue, another option, another way of getting more loot sounds great. Options are exactly what Diablo needs right now. There's not enough of them when it comes to ways to progress your character. If they can improve it through the season journey, then hey, I'm totally down. Now, this section here, when we talk about class updates, the class improvements, we're going to be getting the patch notes actually today. So I'm going to be taking a look at those to go into more detail, but I'm going to give you just the highlights. Barbarian, charge. Charge seems to be way better. And they actually gave a graphic and showed exactly how much more damage it's doing. Sorcerer now gets another option when it comes to applying vulnerable. Lightning Spear is going to have the ability to actually put vulnerability on your enemies, which is just going to add some more build diversity. For Rogue, ranged is getting some love, buffs to penetrating shot, and there's a complete rework on the precision key. We'll have to see how this works out. Major buffs to underused spirit boons are coming for druids. Rabies and lightning storm seem to be what Blizzard has their eyes on when it comes to improving the druids. Necromancer buffs to minions. Please make minions viable. It would be so nice to play a Necromancer that has a bunch of minions. Come on, Blizzard. I know you can do it. Make Necromancers actually be Necromancers and have armies of the dead. While every class is going to be getting a new unique at least, there also is a major game feature change that is really going to impact the way players interact with the game. So first of all, Starfall Cornet is really making meteors look awesome when it comes to sorcerers. It's going to be very reminiscent of the Tal Rasha set from Diablo 3, where you're just going to have a sea of meteors falling down. And then also the unsung ascetics wraps, I guess. These are going to be, they're going to help your lightning storm out as druids. They're going to make it open a lot faster and then be able to just work a little bit quicker and be more efficient. Oh, and have more lightning strikes. All right, and here's the big one. This is the thing that I'm really interested to see how it improves the pacing with the way we interact with the game. Helltides are no longer going to be a sporadic random thing. We're almost always, except for spare a 5-minute change-up period, where we're going to always have access to a helltide. This really helps players that don't have a ton of time available to constantly wait for helltides and be able to schedule around helltides. This is where, outside of the 5-minute change window where it goes to a new zone, we're going to be able to constantly use helltides to be able to gain more gear. This is going to completely remap the way that we farm gear, is like getting our summoning materials and then also looting cinders to be able to try to open up the chests. But it's also going to help out players that want to farm out some of those uniques that you can get directly from helltides. I'm specifically thinking of the druid legendary. That name escapes me at the top of my head. What is it? Moon Howl? Lightning Howl? Hold on. Yeah, I was totally wrong. Tempest Roar. Yeah, I know a lot of Druid players are talking about farming specific chests to try to get Tempest Roar. Well, you're going to be able to farm it a little bit easier with always having uptime on helltides. It's always going to be an option for you to go out and try to find your Tempest Roar for your build. Yet another way that Storm Druids, Lightning Druids are going to be getting some love when it comes to Season 3. All right, everyone, that's it. That's everything. I've tried to pack in as much of the information we got from the 2-hour session down into a small amount of time as possible. Next thing you got to do is figure out what class you're going to be taking into Season 3. And also you got to start thinking about how you're going to build your little robot. No fear, in the description below, I'm going to link as soon as I finish going through the patch notes. Those videos will be coming out very soon if they're not already in the description below. You can check that and I'll see you there if it is. All right, and everyone, if the video did help you out today, please heroic strike that like button. And if you want to stay tuned for more Diablo content in the future, please bash the subscribe. I appreciate your time and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.